Welcome to our webinar on financials, reconciliation, balancing your books with Worldline and Member365, presented by Member365. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Christine Bundy. I am the Director of Customer Success, and I will be hosting today. Just for everyone's purposes, today's session is being recorded. It will be posted on our YouTube channel. All videos are off and sound is off. So if you have questions, which I love questions, please put them into the Q&A and we will answer them at the end of today's session. So there will be time for questions. With me today, I have the amazing Maggie McLeod, who is our accounting bookkeeper with Member365. She also does bookkeeping for some of our associations that use Member365. So she has offered today to take us through her process of reconciling the books using Worldline by doing kind of the clearing account, or how she sets up QuickBooks and what reports she's going to be using. So I'm going to hand it over to Maggie. Thank you, Maggie, for joining us today.
You're very welcome. I hope that I'm able to give some advice on some simple, fairly simple ways of trying to make all this work together, because sometimes it gets a little overcomplicated. I think the first thing I would like to start with is just talking about things to make it easier to actually be able to work with Worldline and your QuickBooks. So what I've done, we have both Canadian funds and US funds through Worldline. And so I've set up a holding account that is a bank and a cash on hand account. And I've set one up for both of our Worldline accounts, our US and our Canadian dollar accounts, because you want to be able to work in the currency that you're accepting the payments in. So I have those two different holding accounts. And the idea is that these types of accounts are ones that can actually be reconciled periodically. And it's up to you how often you reconcile them. I tend to do it at the end of a month, just because it's a nice clean way to end it, but you can do it every day if you'd like, and you can do it every couple of days or every week. It's entirely up to you. The second thing that you should do is recognize that there are fees involved with Worldline. As with any credit card payment function, there are fees. And so you can set up a Worldline processing fee account for the expenses that are incurred to process the transactions, or you can simply put them to your bank fees expense account. I personally use the bank fees expense account because that's really what they are. They're fees. And the Canadian and the US Worldline operate differently through the banks. So we'll get into that at the end. So I guess we'll just jump right in and we'll start with what it looks like when you log into Worldline. And we're going to start with the Canadian funds one first. So you'll notice the currency that we're using is up in the right-hand corner, and it's welcoming me today. But there are a couple of different reports that I just want to point out. The first one is the transaction report, and I suspect that's the one that you're going to use most often, because that's where it shows you what payments are made on a day or a given period, whatever period you select in Worldline. The settlement summary in the Canadian one is where the fees that are billed for that particular day show up. They always take a day to show up. So if you're trying to put in information for the 1st of April, you'll have to wait until the 2nd of April to get what the fees were for the day before, because it's only processed once daily. So the settlement summary is about processing fees. The transaction report is about the payments that went through. And the summary report, which is right under reporting and analysis, that one's the one that I use at the end of every month, because it lists every transaction that occurred through your Worldline account for the entire month. And you can reconcile that with your bank feed stuff in QuickBooks. Okay, so I hope everybody's doing okay so far. The next one we're going to talk about is we're going to actually talk about how this looks. So this is what your transaction report looks like, and I'm sure you're all familiar with that. So here's your amount that has the amount. Under order is usually where either the name of your client or the invoice number or however you want to do it, that's what would occur there. On the second line, though, you'll notice that there's no authorization code and there's a red X. The red X means it didn't actually process. So the payment you were trying to receive from somebody didn't go through for whatever reason. And that's where your payments are. So the way you would record that payment is you'd say, okay, I have $394.37 from Joe's Steakhouse, and so I'm going to process that payment. So you go into your QuickBooks, you go to the invoice that you sent, and you put the payment against your client. So you click on payment, receive payment, and then you use the Worldline account, your Canadian Worldline account in this case, to process the payment on. So it would go from your payment winds up going to the deposit to would be your Worldline account. So now you put the payment for the invoice in the Worldline account. Okay, so on the next slide, we're going to look at the total fees column in the settlement summary. So this is what it looks like for a bunch of different days because I have 5 different days there. So each day you would want to post the fees, the total fees for the day. You'd want to post those again to the Worldline account, and it's a bank fees expense or a Worldline processing fees expense, but the amount that money comes out of your Worldline account. Okay, so it means that it needs to be processed as an expense, and the money comes from, doesn't really go anywhere, but it comes from your Worldline account so that it adds up. So once you've done those things, you're going to see the payments come into your bank account, which is on the next slide. And so in your bank account, this is what it looks like. And so I created a rule so that it doesn't try and automatically match things from this because I don't want it to match to things. Some days you may only have one payment, for example, and it shows up in a specific amount and it's the same. Here, what you're going to do is you're going to transfer this amount to also your Worldline account. So now and you're going to put it on, it didn't come in until the 26th of March, but it was for the 21st of March, that date. So you want that bank detail to show up in your Worldline account because that will tell you that's the day that the payments match. So the payments from March 21st will match 185.91. The payments from March 23rd will match 997.49, and so on. So you're going to send that as either a transfer or a deposit, whichever you prefer, to the deposit to Worldline account. It's already in your bank feed, so it's going to be in your bank once you accept the transaction, but the account you want to send it to is the Worldline account for your particular currency. Because I use it for 2 different currencies. So this is it. So once you get there, what you've now got in your Worldline account is you have the payment from your client, you have the payment from Worldline into your bank, and you have the fees that it was billed for each of the days. So what you're going to have in Worldline is enough to be able to say, okay, I have the 185.91 and I have the payment, the expense, and the deposit to cover that. So it should wind up at 0 by the time you're done. I hope that's making sense for everybody so far. Next slide, we're going to talk about is the US Worldline. It's a little different, as is the login. I don't know how many of you use US accounts, but I hope this is helpful. And it's slightly different because it has only the transaction report and the summary report, which are the ones that we use the most. And also, there's none of the settlement summary on this one. And the reason being is that the US banks tend to do the fees themselves. We'll show you what that looks like in a few minutes. But essentially, the landing page is slightly different. The processing fees come from the bank. So if we move on to the next slide, we'll see what happens when you get revenue. It's the same process, by the way. You use the payments to your Worldline holding account, and you just use those same processes we just talked about. The difference is that it will be the total amount of your payments will add up. So on this particular day, on the 26th, they will add up to the right amount. So you'll be able to see from your payments, and usually it's the following day. So it's not as far behind as the Canadian one. So usually it'll be on the following day. But that 826 will represent the total amount of the payments. And you'll see below that, there are two charges that are coming out that were spent. So it works out to a total of $20.85 on that day. And those are the fees for Worldline and any banking fees that go with it. So you're just going to want to assign those to whichever account you decided that you wanted to use, whether it was a Worldline expense fees or whether it was just the bank fees. And I think that's I talked pretty fast. Sorry about that. And I hope I didn't miss anything, but I'm hoping that if you have questions, I'm happy to try and answer them as best I can.
Yeah, so now it's time for questions. So if you do have questions, you can put them into the Q&A. A common question, though, that I get, Maggie, from a lot of associations is how often does Worldline deposit? Do they have a sequence of so many days, or how often?
No, I've never been able to decipher any sort of trend. The Worldline US tends to be next day, or if it's over a weekend, they don't do anything on a weekend. No, none of the banks process anything on a weekend. So often on Mondays, you'll get a bunch or Tuesdays, because some banks in Canada don't actually do a whole lot on Monday either. They process on Friday night, but it doesn't show up until Tuesday. So it's hard to tell, but the Canadian one is good in that when they deposit it in the bank detail, they tell you which day it is, which day it's for. The US one is less specific. It just puts in a deposit, and sometimes you'll have an American Express card, for example. Sometimes the payments from the American Express card take a little while longer. So if you have accepted an American Express card in the US Worldline, sometimes it can take an extra day to appear or two. So Worldline US overall tends to come in quicker, but the Canadian funds tend to be better identified, if that makes any sense. Is that helpful?
Thank you. So another question that I get asked a lot too from just our support side of things is do you ever have to go in and use the revenue report for doing a reconciliation, or is that just for references that you ever use it?
The revenue report from Member365?
Correct.
So I use that with one of my clients, and I love that report because it's set up so that it's very simple to see the tax. It's very simple to see all the amounts. And I think that the revenue report that you get from Member365 is so well laid out. There is a lot of information in it. So if you look through it, there's every bit of detail you could ever want in that report. And yes, I use that as a monthly report for one of my clients who gets a whole lot of transfers and from around the world. And I find it is perfect. So you can actually use that report as well to make sure that all of your payments that you're putting in QuickBooks actually went through the Worldline report. So in other words, yeah, it's a good comparison. So you could take the summary report that you get from Worldline, and you could take that and match it up to your revenue report. You should be able to match it up almost exactly.
Awesome. Thank you. Oh, we have another question. Is Member365 planning doing QuickBooks integration? Yes, we are. It is in final testing mode. I'm actually very happy to announce that. So we are going to be doing some beta testing in the next few months is what I am told by our development team. So yes, it is coming. Great question. And I know Maggie is super excited about it as much as we are.
I can't wait. I can't wait. I've been doing this without it for, I don't know, a long time, and I think it will be much simpler once we get that working. Yeah. I've been doing this since 2017 without it, so it can get a little bit overwhelming if you have a lot of payments. And if you have a large number of members or a large number of people who are sending you money, it can get a little overwhelming sometimes, especially if you're running a conference and you have 350 people coming to this conference. That's where that revenue report from Member365 comes in really handy, because it identifies everybody so well. Yeah, and where they're from and all that. Does that answer the question a little bit?
Thank you. All right, so that's all the questions that we have today. However, if you have more questions or questions for Maggie, you can reach out to me and I can send them along to Maggie. We'd be more than happy. I love questions, so ask all the questions. And so for today, that's everything. Thank you again, Maggie, for coming out and joining us and doing the presentation. And we'll see everybody again shortly. Bye for now.
Bye.